8 months ago, the Trump administration announced that U.S. and Israeli strikes had completely destroyed Iran's nuclear capacity. 2 days ago, both countries launched fresh strikes on Iran, killing Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Those two facts sit in direct contradiction with each other, and they are the starting point for everything we need to talk about today. Hey, welcome back to World Powers Fusion. In this episode, we're going to get into what just happened in Iran and, more importantly, why. But before we do, let's be clear about something. The official story coming out of Washington is only part of what's going on here. And this channel exists precisely because half the picture isn't good. Enough, so let's start with what Washington is saying. The Trump administration's position is that Iran had reconstituted its nuclear program faster than anyone expected, was approximately 1 week away from producing a nuclear-capable missile, and that Iran's existing ballistic missile arsenal already posed a credible threat to European cities. Washington also says that diplomatic talks in Geneva had completely broken down, with Iranian officials refusing to put their ballistic missile stockpile on the table, limiting negotiations exclusively to nuclear enrichment. Those are the stated reasons. But when you place them next to what the same administration was saying just 8 months ago, serious questions emerged. In July, the Trump administration stood before the world and declared that U.S. and Israeli strikes had completely obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity. They dismissed any suggestion that Iran had hidden enriched uranium or preserved technical capability. They said it was done, finished, over. Now those same officials are telling us Iran was a week away from a nuclear missile. So here is the straightforward question that demands a straight answer. Either the July strikes failed to do what Washington said they did, or Iran managed to rebuild near-weapons-level nuclear capability in under 8 months. Both of those possibilities say something important. Either the public was not told the truth in July, or there was a serious failure in understanding how fast Iran could reconstitute. Whichever it is, it matters. Now let's look at the world Trump was operating in just before the strike on Iran. His approval ratings were at their lowest point since taking office over a year ago. A Washington Post survey conducted just before the operation showed 63% of Americans disapproving of his presidency, with 73% of independent voters expressing disapproval. He had just come off a deeply damaging reversal in Minneapolis, where his deportation operations resulted in the deaths of 2 American citizens. And fresh questions about the Epstein investigation had resurfaced in the press, with allegations circling directly around the White House. It is a well-documented pattern in political history that governments facing serious domestic pressure sometimes turn to foreign military action to shift the national conversation. Margaret Thatcher did it during the Falklands War when she was in serious political trouble at home. This does not automatically mean that domestic pressure drove the Iran decision, but any honest look at the timing has to account for the environment in which it was made. Netanyahu was dealing with his own pressures on the Israeli side, elections approaching, ongoing legal proceedings against him personally. But it is also important to say this: Israel's position on Iran and nuclear weapons is not a product of Netanyahu's personal circumstances. Israel has maintained for decades, across multiple governments and prime ministers, that it will not allow any regional power to acquire nuclear weapons capability. The strikes are consistent with that long-standing doctrine. The political timing, however, is harder to separate from Netanyahu's current situation. What neither Washington nor Tel Aviv has clearly answered is the question of what they actually want Iran to look like when this is over. To get a sense of the possible strategic thinking, it helps to look at what Trump did in Venezuela. He moved against the Maduro government, removed him from power, but left the regime's underlying structure intact, and then used that leverage to secure significant American influence over Venezuela's oil industry, which sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. The approach was apply pressure, destabilize leadership, then negotiate favorable terms. What makes Iran interesting is that Iranian negotiators apparently saw that playbook coming. In the days before the strikes, Iranian officials reportedly signaled they were open to a Venezuela-style arrangement, offering the United States a substantial stake in Iran's oil sector in exchange for standing down militarily. The Trump administration said no and launched the operation anyway. That refusal tells us something. It suggests the goal here goes beyond an oil deal. It points toward something more fundamental, a complete restructuring of Iranian political power, not just a renegotiation of economic terms for Israel. The strategic interest is different but runs in the same direction. Israel's concern has never primarily been Iran's oil. It has been Iran's ability to arm and fund proxy forces Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, militias across Iraq and Syria, and the prospect of Iran becoming a nuclear state. A weakened Iran, even a chaotic one, removes that threat. From Israel's strategic standpoint, an ungovernable Iran that cannot project power may be preferable to a stable Iran that can. That brings us to what may be the single most important issue right now. There is no visible plan for what comes next. The Trump administration has told the Iranian people this is their moment to take control of their country, while simultaneously telling them to stay indoors because the bombing is ongoing. It has called on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, an organization of roughly 290,000 armed personnel, to lay down their weapons and surrender without specifying to whom, under what process, or with what guarantees on the question of who leads Iran after this. Washington has been conspicuously silent. Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the late Shah, has a substantial following among Iranian diaspora communities and has been floated as a potential transitional figure. But Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the most influential foreign policy voices in Trump's circle, was asked directly at the World Economic Forum whether he supported Pahlavi leading Iran and said no. The State Department has kept him at arm's length. No successor, no transitional framework. No governance model has been publicly endorsed by Washington. That gap is not a minor detail. It is the most essential part of this entire situation. When the United States removed Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq without a credible post-conflict plan, what followed was over a decade of sectarian conflict, hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths, and ultimately the conditions that produced ISIS. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. It has a far more developed institutional structure, and its Revolutionary Guard is a deeply embedded parallel state. It does not simply disappear because its supreme leader has been killed. There is also the Strait of Hormuz to consider. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through that waterway. Any Iranian military action targeting shipping there would drive oil prices sharply upward, with immediate economic consequences for Europe, Asia, and the United States. So here's where things stand. Khamenei is dead. The region is volatile. The administration's justification for striking now contradicts what it said 8 months ago. The domestic and political pressures on both Trump and Netanyahu were real and significant at the moment those strikes were made. Iran reportedly offered a deal and was turned down, which points to objectives that run deeper than economics. And there is, as of now, no publicly articulated plan for what Iran is supposed to look like once the bombs stop falling. The Iranian regime was, by most credible accounts, a genuine threat to its neighbors, to regional stability, and above all, to its own people, whom it killed in large numbers for daring to protest. That is not in dispute. The harder question, the one that history insists we ask, is whether what is happening now is the path most likely to produce a safer, more stable Iran, and whether the decision-makers involved have genuinely thought through what the day after looks like right now. The evidence suggests they haven't. This is World Powers Fusion. Every day, we bring you us, domestic and foreign politics with full context and no agenda. If that's what you've been looking for, subscribe now and turn on notifications. We'll be back tomorrow.